"You're getting bigger," she accused, her voice a low hum against the deep thrum of the scavenged drive. "Why are you getting bigger? Stop it." Kalen froze, a rusty power conduit sparking in his hand. He risked a glance over his shoulder. She was perched on a stack of warped metal plates, watching him with eyes that held the swirling depth of a nebula. Not hostile exactly, but intensely focused and definitely annoyed. Her bioluminescent markings, usually a faint pulse, were flaring along her arms and the delicate membranes behind her ears, shifting from a soft azure to an agitated emerald. It was the closest thing he'd seen to a blush, since he'd found her hiding in a blown-out cryopod on the derelict. "I'm not getting bigger," he said slowly, trying to keep his voice level. The last thing he needed was to freak her out, again. She'd been jumpy as hell for weeks, a constant, unpredictable presence in the cramped, salvaged guts of his ship, the Rust Bucket. "I'm standing up. I was kneeling to fix this." He gestured vaguely with the sparking conduit. Her head tilted, a fluid, unnerving motion that wasn't quite human. "You are larger than you were. Mass is increasing." "Why?" The emerald pulsed brighter. "Are you consuming something? Are you a growth parasite?" Kalen sighed, running a hand through his sweat-slicked hair. This was the 9th conversation this cycle about his basic biological functions. The last one had been about why his heart made noise. "No, I'm not a parasite. I'm just standing. My legs were bent, now they're straight. It makes me look taller." He straightened fully, stretching his back. The flickering emerald on her skin intensified, radiating a low heat he could feel even from across the small cargo bay. It wasn't just annoyance. It was something else. Curiosity, apprehension. It was damn hard to read alien body language, especially hers. "Look," he tried, lowering himself slowly back into a crouch. The emerald dimmed slightly. "See? Smaller." He stood again. The emerald flared back up, quicker this time. "Bigger." He knelt. "Smaller." He stood. "Bigger." She watched the demonstration with unnerving intensity, her gaze tracking his movement like a predator's. Her fingers, long and tipped with small, sharp claws, flexed against the metal plate. "It is reversible," she murmured, testing the concept. "It is not a constant increase." "No, it's just standing." He offered a small, hopefully reassuring smile. "We do that, humans. We bend our knees, we straighten them. Sometimes we sit down, sometimes we lie down." "Lie down." The pulsing light shifted to a softer violet, a color he associated with her periods of quiet observation. "Flat." "Yeah, like sleeping." "Sleeping requires lying flat." "For humans, usually, or mostly flat." He decided not to get into the complexities of napping positions. This was already exhausting. "Look, this conduit's about to blow. Can you maybe just sit tight for a minute?" She didn't respond verbally, but the violet light on her skin shifted again, settling into a steady, almost contemplative blue. She didn't seem scared anymore, just absorbing the data. Her eyes, large and liquid, didn't leave him. He went back to the conduit, the heat from her bioluminescence a constant, unnerving presence on his back. He could feel the subtle vibrations of the ship around them, the distant hum of the life support, the nearer rattle of loose plating. It was a symphony of decay, but it was his symphony. And now it had a guest who thought his kneecaps were a sign of impending parasitic invasion. He swore softly, wrestling with the sparking wires. This was just another Tuesday in the life of Kalen, professional space scavenger, an unintentional guardian of the galaxy's most fascinating, frustrating, and apparently height-sensitive alien. The air between them felt thick, charged not just with static from the failing tech, but with something else he couldn't name, a raw, untamed energy that seemed to radiate from her very presence. He worked faster, suddenly keenly aware of the silence behind him, broken only by his own ragged breathing and the crackle of the conduit. Every instinct screamed that she was watching, learning, judging. The blue light pulsed softly, a silent, alien heartbeat echoing his own frantic rhythm. He finally secured the conduit, the sparking dying down to a low, steady hum. He wiped sweat from his brow with a greasy hand and turned. She hadn't moved. The blue light remained steady and calm, but her eyes were fixed on him, unblinking. The silence stretched thick and expectant. He felt a familiar wave of unease wash over him. This wasn't the silence of comfortable companionship. It was the silence of intense, alien observation, like a lab specimen under a microscope. He cleared his throat. "Okay, that's better." She didn't acknowledge his statement. Instead, her gaze flickered downwards, trailing slowly over his body. The movement was unnervingly deliberate, making his skin prickle. The blue light on her skin began to pulse again, a slow, steady beat that somehow felt curious, or maybe assessing. He couldn't tell. "You generate heat," she stated, her voice still a low hum but with a new note of intrigue. "Even when not moving, much heat. Why?" "Metabolism," he said, keeping his voice even. "My body burns energy constantly to stay alive. It creates heat as a byproduct." He knew he sounded like he was lecturing a child, but explaining basic biology to an alien was apparently his new life's calling. "Your body doesn't." She paused, her head tilting again. The blue pulse quickened slightly. "We regulate temperature externally, through resonant frequencies." She gestured vaguely with one clawed hand towards the hull of the ship. "The ship's field. It is weak, unstable. You are inefficient." Kalen snorted. "Yeah, well, inefficient keeps me alive when the external field generator craps out." He looked around the cargo bay, its walls a patchwork of salvaged plating and exposed wiring. "Efficient is for ships that aren't held together with hope and duct tape." Her eyes narrowed slightly, and the blue light shifted towards a faint, swirling green. This color, he'd learned, indicated confusion mixed with suspicion. "Duct tape," she repeated, testing the sound of the words. "It's a sticky sealant. Holds things together, temporarily." He decided not to elaborate on the structural integrity of the rust bucket. She didn't need to know how precarious things really were. The green light swirled, a miniature aurora borealis playing out on her skin. He wondered what kind of complex calculations were happening behind those alien eyes. Was she calculating the tensile strength of duct tape, assessing the evolutionary advantages of manual temperature regulation? "Humans," she murmured, her voice almost a whisper, "are strange." "Tell me about it," he muttered under his breath. He stood, stretching again. The subtle shift in his height immediately caught her attention. The blue pulse returned, steady and observational. It was like living with a walking, talking, bioluminescent tricorder. Every action, every sound, every physiological function was new data, processed and categorized with unnerving intensity. He moved past her towards the small galley area, needing a drink. He could feel her gaze tracking his every step. It was like being under constant, gentle surveillance. Except it wasn't gentle, not really. It was just relentless. He poured himself a mug of recycled water, the familiar metallic taste grounding him. "Your internal fluids," she stated from behind him, making him jump slightly. He hadn't heard her move. She was standing just a few feet away now, her form outlined by the soft blue glow. "They are contained." He took a long swallow. "Yeah, we have skin." "Skin," she repeated, her head tilting. "A barrier to prevent leakage." "Basically." He leaned against the counter, setting the mug down. He needed to get her to talk about herself, about where she came from, about why she was drifting alone in a cryopod in the middle of nowhere. But every attempt so far had been met with either silence or another barrage of questions about his own anatomy. "What about you? You don't leak." He immediately regretted how stupid that sounded. She regarded him with that intense, liquid gaze. The blue light shifted, subtly warming towards a soft magenta. This was a new color, one he hadn't seen before. It felt warmer, less analytical. "Our forms are porous," she said slowly, her voice losing some of its clinical detachment. "We exchange substance with our environment. It is how we understand." "You understand by leaking." Kalen stared at her. This just kept getting weirder. "Not leaking," she corrected, the magenta deepening slightly, taking on a faint, almost shy quality. "Exchange, resonance, we absorb, information, energy, we connect." She lifted one hand, her long, thin fingers splayed, and for a moment the air around it seemed to shimmer, the blue-magenta light intensifying, radiating a subtle heat. He felt a strange tingling sensation on his own skin, like distant static electricity. It wasn't unpleasant, just alien. He watched her hand, fascinated despite himself. It was beautiful in a completely non-human way. The delicate membranes between her fingers pulsed with the light like tiny, living solar flares. "You connect?" he asked softly, his voice lower than intended. The clinical interrogation had somehow bled into something else, something more personal. Her gaze returned to his, and the magenta light seemed to bloom across her entire form, a warm, inviting color he'd never seen. Her eyes, those vast liquid pools, seemed to hold a new depth, less analytical and more receptive. "Yes," she whispered, the sound barely audible above the ship's low hum. "We seek resonance with others, with the world." The air between them felt charged, not with the static of failing machinery, but with an unfamiliar energy that made his heart pound. He stood frozen, caught in the unexpected intimacy of the moment, the strange, beautiful light of her form illuminating the grime and decay of the rust bucket. The silence was back, but this time it wasn't observational, it was resonant. And for the first time since he'd pulled her from the cryopod, Kalen felt something other than weary frustration and cautious curiosity. He felt a pull, a strange, magnetic force drawing him into the orbit of this enigmatic, bioluminescent alien. The magenta light on her skin intensified, radiating a warmth that seemed to reach across the space separating them. A silent invitation he didn't understand, but felt deep in his bones. The moment stretched, thick with unspoken questions and alien energy. Kalen found himself unable to look away, drawn into the shifting patterns of light on her skin, the depthless pools of her eyes. The magenta pulsed steadily now, a silent conversation he couldn't translate with words but somehow understood on a deeper level. It was a feeling of acceptance, curiosity, something that felt remarkably like interest. From an alien who had spent weeks analyzing his metabolic output and questioning his standing habits, he cleared his throat again, breaking the spell slightly. "Resonance," he repeated, the word feeling strange on his tongue. Like a tuning fork." She nodded, a slow, graceful movement. The magenta light shimmered, sending subtle ripples across her form. Attunement, we resonate with compatible frequencies." Her gaze swept over him again, slower this time, more deliberate. The tingling sensation on his skin returned, stronger now, almost like a gentle current. He felt exposed, seen in a way he hadn't been in years. Seen not as Kalen, the scavenging pilot, the guy with a past he didn't talk about, but as a collection of energies, frequencies, a form to be resonated with. It was unnerving and strangely exhilarating. "And humans," he prompted, his voice still low, "do we resonate?" Her head tilted back slightly, and she seemed to study the space above him, as if sensing frequencies he couldn't perceive. The magenta light dimmed slightly, replaced by a thoughtful violet with streaks of green. "Your frequencies are chaotic," she stated, her voice returning to a more analytical tone, though tinged with that new, soft vulnerability. "Loud, unfiltered, like a storm." Kalen couldn't help but let out a short, rusty laugh. "Yeah, well, life's kind of a storm, isn't it?" He gestured around the dilapidated galley. "Especially out here." The green streaks in the violet light brightened slightly. "Yours, more so than others." He ran a hand over his face, suddenly feeling the weight of years of scavenging, isolation, and running. Maybe. He didn't want to get into his past, not with her, not with anyone. So, you can read feelings like a mood ring. She made a soft sound, a low chirr that vibrated in the air. It wasn't laughter, but it wasn't disagreement either. More than mood, we perceive the flow, the exchange, the intent. The violet-green swirled, reflecting the complexity of her explanation. "You intend to remain here." He shrugged, leaning more heavily against the counter. "For now, this ship's my home, such as it is." He looked around the grimy galley, a pang of something akin to affection twisting in his gut. It was a rust bucket, but it was his rust bucket. It keeps me isolated. Her gaze sharpened, the green and the violet intensifying. Isolated by choice. Yeah, mostly. He didn't elaborate. There were too many ghosts in his past to invite conversation. She was silent for a moment, the violet-green light pulsing with apparent contemplation. Then she took a step closer. Just one step, but in the confined space it felt significant. The tingling on his skin grew stronger, a palpable warmth radiating from her. Her eyes held his, and he could feel the intensity of her focus, that alien perception trying to read the chaotic frequencies of his human storm. Isolation, she murmured, the word sounding strange and foreign in her voice. Why would a resonant being seek separation? Kalen felt a familiar wall go up inside him. This was getting too close, too personal. He pushed off the counter, needing space. Not all beings are resonant, he said, his voice deliberately neutral. Some of us are just loud and unfiltered. He turned away, walking back towards the cargo bay, towards the relative safety of sparking conduits and rust. I need to check the atmospheric processors. He could feel her watching him go, the weight of her alien gaze heavy on his back. The violet-green light followed him, a silent, questioning presence. He reached the access panel for the processors and began unbolting it, his movements deliberately brisk. He needed to create distance, both physically and emotionally. This alien woman, with her shifting lights and strange resonance, was cracking through the carefully constructed walls he'd built around himself. And that was dangerous. Out here, vulnerability got you killed. He focused on the task at hand, the gritty feel of the metal under his fingers, the squeak of the old bolts. He didn't look back, but he knew she was still there, a luminous enigma in the shadows of his ship, her alien perceptions probing the edges of his human defenses. The air thrummed with that unresolved tension, a mixture of physical closeness and emotional distance, leaving him feeling exposed and raw. He wrestled with the corroded access panel, the metal groaning in protest. His hands, slick with sweat and grime, kept slipping. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself to focus on the task, on the familiar, tangible world of wires and bolts. Anything to avoid thinking about the alien woman standing just feet away, her subtle, non-human form outlined by that ever-present, shifting light. He could still feel the echo of that strange tingling on his skin, the warmth that had radiated from her. It was a sensation utterly foreign, yet strangely compelling. A soft click sounded behind him, and the main lights in the cargo bay, which had been flickering erratically, suddenly stabilized, casting a harsh, steady glare. Kalen froze, his hand on the panel. He hadn't touched the lighting system. He turned slowly. She was standing by the main power junction, her hand resting lightly on a cluster of conduits. The violet-green light on her skin was pulsing rapidly now, almost vibrating. The flow was restricted, she stated, her voice devoid of the usual inflection. An impedance. I adjusted. Kalen stared at her, then back at the junction box. He'd been meaning to reroute power through that section for weeks, but it was a complicated, delicate job he hadn't had time for. She'd just done it, by touching it. You adjusted it, he repeated, his voice flat with disbelief. She nodded, a small, almost imperceptible movement. It resonated, poorly, caused stress on the network. The light on her skin settled back into a calmer blue with just faint streaks of green. It is more stable now. He walked slowly towards the junction, peering at the tangle of wires. He didn't see any physical manipulation, no spliced wires or reconnected terminals. Yet the power flow was smooth, the light steady. He touched a conduit near where her hand had been. It was cooler than it should be, the humming vibration different, smoother. It was impossible. How did you do that? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She met his gaze, her eyes holding a depth he couldn't fathom. I perceived the imbalance, she explained, her voice soft, and harmonized it. Harmonized it. He thought of her explanation of resonance, of attunement. Was this what she meant? That she could somehow interact with energy flows, with physical systems on a fundamental level? It was like something out of a bad holofilm, except the lights were steady. He looked from the junction back to her, a million questions swirling in his head. Who was she? What was she? And what else could she do? The initial mystery of her sudden appearance had just deepened tenfold. She wasn't just a stranded alien, she was something else entirely. Something powerful and potentially dangerous. And she was trapped on his ship, with him. The blue light on her skin shifted again, warming slightly towards magenta. That warm, curious color. "You seem disturbed," she noted, a hint of something like amusement in her voice. Or was it just his projection? "Disturbed doesn't begin to cover it," he admitted, running a hand through his hair. "You just fixed my power grid by touching it." "It was not fixed," she corrected gently. "It was brought into harmony, temporary harmony. The underlying degradation remains." "Right, temporary harmony." He let out a shaky breath. This changed everything. She wasn't just cargo anymore or a frustrating enigma. She was a vital, unpredictable variable, and he had no idea how to handle it. The air crackled with a new tension, born not just of physical proximity and emotional distance, but of sheer, mind-bending alien capability. He felt a prickle of fear, quickly followed by a surge of something else, something that felt suspiciously like wonder. The blue-magenta light pulsed between them, a silent acknowledgement of the shift in their dynamic, leaving Kalen feeling utterly off balance and undeniably intrigued. He needed to figure out what she was, and fast. He spent the next few hours working near her, ostensibly on other repairs but really just observing. She remained near the power junction, seemingly content to simply be. The blue-magenta light on her skin pulsed with a quiet, steady rhythm, reflecting the stable power flow. He watched her out of the corner of his eye, trying to decipher her subtle movements, the almost imperceptible shifts in her posture, the way her head tilted as she seemed to be listening to the ship itself. Was she still harmonizing the power? Was she doing something else he couldn't even comprehend? Every glance deepened the mystery. Her alienness wasn't just physical, it was fundamental, touching on reality itself in ways he hadn't imagined. As the ship's cycle shifted towards rest, the closest the rust bucket got to night, the low hum of the engine softened, and the lights throughout the ship dimmed. Kalen powered down the last of his tools, the silence of the cargo bay feeling vast after hours of clanging metal. He turned to tell her he was heading to his bunk and stopped. She was no longer near the power junction. She had moved silently across the bay and was now standing near his small sleeping alcove. The blue-magenta light on her skin was brighter now, seeming to gather and intensify, casting a soft, warm glow in the dim space. It pulsed, slowly, deliberately, drawing his gaze like a moth to a flame. He walked towards her cautiously, the familiar ache of fatigue in his bones overridden by a sense of heightened awareness. "Hey," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. "I'm heading to bed." She didn't respond verbally. Instead, she extended a hand towards him, her long, luminous fingers reaching out. The air around her hand shimmered, and the tingling sensation returned, stronger than ever, a deep hum that resonated not just on his skin, but seemed to vibrate within his chest. The blue-magenta light intensified further, pulsing with an almost magnetic pull. He hesitated for only a second, curiosity, fear, and that strange, undeniable pull warring within him. He reached out slowly, tentatively. His fingers brushed against hers. It wasn't skin, not like his. It was smooth, cool, and felt alive, like touching pure energy contained in a delicate, flexible shell, and the resonance was immediate, overwhelming. A wave of unfamiliar sensations flooded his mind, colors he'd never seen, sounds he couldn't hear, feelings that weren't his own, yet felt strangely familiar. It was like plugging into a vast, ancient network. The chaotic frequencies of his own internal storm slammed against something ancient, organized, and infinitely complex. He gasped, staggering back slightly, pulling his hand away as if burned. The connection snapped, leaving him dizzy and disoriented, his own body feeling strangely muted in comparison. The vibrant, alien light on her hand dimmed slightly, the blue-magenta returning to its softer pulse. She watched him, her eyes wide and dark in the dim light. Your storm, she murmured, her voice hushed. It is strong but fragmented. He leaned against the bulkhead, trying to catch his breath. What was that? Resonance, she said simply, her extended hand still hovering in the air between them. Attempted attunement, to understand your frequency. You felt that? He asked, his voice raspy. She nodded. The blue magenta light pulsed with a slow, steady rhythm. It was loud. There was no judgment in her voice, only observation. Many conflicting signals: pain, anger, loss. Kalen flinched internally. She had read him, just like that. Read the parts of him he kept buried deep, the parts that made his own internal landscape a chaotic storm. The vulnerability was immediate and stark. He had shown her in that brief touch the raw, unfiltered core of his being. He looked at her hand again, then at her eyes. There was no malice there, only that intense, unwavering curiosity, now tinged with something new, a flicker of understanding, perhaps even empathy. The blue magenta light seemed to soften, becoming less analytical and more gentle. The air between them, moments ago thick with tension and fear, now felt charged with a different kind of energy, raw, exposed, and undeniably intimate. He had shown her his storm, and she had met it not with fear, but with quiet observation and a touch that had shaken him to his core. The silence that settled between them was heavy, weighted with the sudden, profound shift in their relationship, leaving Kalen grappling with the terrifying, exhilarating realization that he was no longer dealing with just a stranded alien, but with a being who could see into the darkest corners of his soul. The silence stretched, filled only by the distant hum of the ship and the ragged sound of Kalen's breathing. He looked at her, really looked at her, seeing past the initial alien strangeness to the being who had just touched his deepest wounds without a word. The blue magenta light on her skin pulsed gently, a silent question hanging in the air. His carefully constructed walls felt brittle, threatened by the sheer honesty of that brief, resonant contact. He had spent years keeping people out, keeping himself safe from the pain of connection and loss. And in less than a second, she had bypassed all of it. He pushed off the bulkhead slowly, deliberately. The air around him still felt warm from the lingering resonance of her touch. Yeah, he said, his voice quiet. There's a lot of that. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. She had already seen it. She took another step closer, and the blue magenta light deepened, radiating a warmth that seemed to chase the chill from the derelict ship. The tingling returned, a soft hum this time, not jarring like before, but gentle and inviting. Her eyes, vast and liquid, held his gaze, and in their depths he saw not judgment, but a profound, alien empathy. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced. The storm, she murmured, her voice soft, almost a whisper. It can be calmed, grounded. He managed a small, dry smile. You think so? She lifted her hand again, slowly, offering it to him. The blue magenta light pulsed, a silent invitation. Resonance, she repeated, with another. Kalen looked at her hand, then back at her face. His heart was pounding, a frantic human rhythm against the quiet, steady pulse of the alien light. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to retreat, to rebuild his walls brick by painstaking brick. But another part of him, a lonely, wounded part he rarely acknowledged, yearned for the connection her touch had offered, for the impossible promise of resonance with his chaotic storm. He thought of the years alone, the cold emptiness of space, the gnawing ache of isolation. And he looked at the warmth radiating from her, the quiet strength in her alien gaze. Slowly, hesitantly, he reached out his hand again. This time he didn't pull back. His fingers met hers, and the resonance returned not as a shock but as a deepening hum that settled within him. The wave of alien sensation was still there, but now it felt less overwhelming, more integrated. And beneath the alien frequencies he felt something new, a steady, powerful presence, grounding his own scattered energy, like an anchor dropped into his internal storm. The blue magenta light surged, wrapping around their joined hands, bathing them in its soft, warm glow. It wasn't just light. It felt like energy, like life, flowing between them. He felt a strange sense of peace settle over him, a quiet calm he hadn't experienced in years. It was terrifying and beautiful and utterly alien. He looked at her, their hands joined, their forms illuminated by the pulsing, resonant light. In that moment, surrounded by the decay of the rust bucket, Kalen felt a profound connection to this non-human being, a bond forged not through words or shared history, but through a direct, elemental resonance of their very beings. The vulnerability was still there, stark and raw, but it was met not with fear but with acceptance, with attunement. The air thrummed with the energy of their connection, a silent promise of something new, something potentially world-altering, unfolding between a lonely human and a luminous alien in the depths of space. He held her hand, and in the quiet pulse of the light, he knew his life had just changed forever. They stood there for a long moment, hands joined, the blue-magenta light pulsing steadily around them. Kalen felt the alien presence settle into his awareness, not as an intrusion but as a quiet companion. His own chaotic energy felt less frantic, more contained. It was a profound physical and emotional sensation, unlike anything he'd ever known. Finally, gently, she withdrew her hand. The light dimmed slightly, but the warmth, the lingering hum of resonance remained. She met his gaze, her eyes softer now, holding a depth of emotion he was just beginning to recognize. "Your storm is tired," she murmured, her voice gentle. He managed a shaky breath, the connection leaving him feeling both exhausted and strangely energized. "Yeah, it is." She gestured towards his sleeping alcove. "Rest, the storm, it needs quiet." He nodded, still reeling from the intensity of their contact. "Right, rest." He took a step towards the alcove, then paused, looking back at her. "What about you?" She tilted her head, the soft blue-magenta light pulsing. "I will monitor, maintain harmony." She gestured vaguely around the cargo bay. "While the storm sleeps." He hesitated, wanting to ask 1,000 questions, but the sheer exhaustion of the day, amplified by the alien resonance, was catching up to him. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay, thanks for the harmony." A faint, almost imperceptible shift occurred in the light on her skin, a subtle ripple that he was beginning to associate with amusement. "It is efficient." He managed a weak smile. "Right, efficient." He turned and walked into the small alcove, pulling the thin privacy screen across. He didn't close it fully, leaving a gap. He wanted to be able to see the light. He lay down on his narrow bunk, the metal protesting softly under his weight. He could feel the ship around him, the steady hum that now felt subtly different, more stable, more harmonious. And he could feel her presence, a quiet anchor in the storm of his own being. He closed his eyes, the image of the pulsing blue-magenta light burned into his vision. Sleep came surprisingly quickly, deep and dreamless, the first truly restful sleep he'd had in years. When he woke, the cargo bay was quiet, the main lights still steady. He sat up, listening. No alien noises, no questions about his metabolism. He pushed the privacy screen aside. She was gone. A cold knot of fear tightened in his stomach. He scrambled out of the bunk, scanning the cargo bay, empty. He ran through the ship, checking the galley, the cockpit, the small engineering bay. Nothing. She wasn't here. Had she left? How? The ship was still in deep space, light years from anywhere. Had she somehow resonated her way off the ship? The thought was both terrifying and absurd. He returned to the cargo bay, the quiet amplification of his panic. He stopped near the power junction where she had been standing. He touched the conduits. They felt normal, the steady hum reassuring yet unsettling. He looked down, and that's when he saw it. On the dusty metal floor near where she had been was a faint, iridescent residue. It glowed faintly in the dim light, a swirl of blue and magenta, fading even as he watched it. It was the same color as her light. He knelt, touching the residue with a tentative finger. It felt cool and left a faint, glittering trace on his skin. A message, a marker, or just what was left behind when an alien being resonated herself away. He stood slowly, his mind racing. She was gone. The strange, luminous alien who had read his pain, calmed his internal storm, and apparently fixed his power grid with a touch, had vanished as mysteriously as she had appeared. The silence of the ship felt heavier now, filled with the echo of her presence and the unanswered questions she'd left behind. He looked at the fatting residue on the floor, a tangible reminder of the impossible events of the past few weeks. He felt a profound sense of loss, sharp and unexpected. He hadn't realized how accustomed he had become to her quiet observation, her strange questions, the unsettling beauty of her light. Just as the despair began to settle in, his comm panel chimed. He stared at it, surprised. His comm unit was ancient, barely functional, and he rarely received messages out here in the outer rim. He activated it, the screen flickering to life. It was an encoded frequency, one he didn't recognize, and there was a message. He opened it, his hands trembling slightly. It wasn't text. It was a data packet. He initiated the download, watching the progress bar crawl across the screen. It took several long minutes. When it finished, a single image appeared on the screen. It was a star map, and on the map, highlighted with a pulsing blue magenta marker, was a single star system. He zoomed in. There was a planet in that system, a planet he didn't recognize, not on any human charts. Next to the planet's designation was a symbol. It was intricate, beautiful, made of swirling lines of light. It looked familiar, like the patterns on her skin. And below the map, a single line of text, translated into a basic human language. Resonance found, seeking attunement, location provided. Kalen stared at the screen, his heart hammering against his ribs. She wasn't gone. She had sent him a message, a location, her location. Was this where she came from? Was she asking him to follow her? The blue magenta marker pulsed on the screen, a silent beacon in the vastness of space. The loneliness of the rust bucket felt less absolute now, replaced by a surge of purpose, of direction. He looked at the symbol, the swirling lines of light. Resonance, attunement, location provided. He knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within his bones, that he had to go. He didn't understand any of it, the resonance, her abilities, why she had chosen him. But he knew she was waiting. And the thought of her, of the quiet strength of her presence, of the unexpected beauty of her light, pulled him with a force more powerful than any derelict ship or hidden treasure ever had. He looked out the cockpit window at the swirling expanse of stars, the distant, cold beauty of the cosmos. Somewhere out there, marked by a pulsing blue magenta light on his screen, was the key to everything that had just happened, and to whatever came next. The tension wasn't gone, it had just transformed, shifting from the intimate personal space of his ship to the vast, unknown reaches of the galaxy. He felt fear, yes, but also a thrilling sense of anticipation. He was Kalen, space scavenger, accidental guardian, and now, seeker. He had a destination, and a reason to find it. He spent the next few cycles preparing the rust bucket for a long-range jump. The ship wasn't designed for journeys into uncharted systems, but Kalen had a knack for coaxing impossible performance out of dying machines. He rerouted power, reinforced structural weak points, and calibrated the ancient jump drive. Every bolt tightened, every wire spliced felt imbued with new meaning. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was going somewhere, for someone. The fatting, iridescent residue on the cargo bay floor served as a constant reminder, a whisper of alien light and impossible connection. He re-examined the data packet she'd sent countless times. The star map was detailed, showing gravitational anomalies and subtle energy signatures his own scanners couldn't detect. The system was deep in the outer rim, far from any known trade routes or human settlements. Exactly the kind of place Kalen usually avoided, but avoidance wasn't an option anymore. The symbol, those swirling lines of light, fascinated him. He tried drawing it, tracing the intricate patterns, feeling a faint echo of the resonance he'd felt when touching her. It was beautiful, complex, and utterly alien. He managed to cross-reference the star system's approximate location with some old, heavily encrypted data he'd salvaged years ago, forgotten files from a long-dead corporation. The files contained fragmented information about protocol chimera and warnings about highly sensitive energy signatures in the outer rim. There was no mention of the species or the symbol, but the geographical location was a match. It sent a shiver down his spine. Whatever she was, whatever her people were, someone had been interested in them. And that rarely meant anything good. He felt a renewed urgency. Finally, the rust bucket was ready, or as ready as it was ever going to be. Kalen strapped into the pilot's seat, the familiar worn controls comforting beneath his hands. He looked at the star map on the main screen, the blue magenta marker a beacon calling him forward. He set the jump coordinates, running through the pre-jump sequence, his movements automatic and precise. But his mind was on the alien woman, on the resonance, on the swirling symbol. "All right, girl," he murmured to the ship, patting the console. "Let's see if you've got one more impossible journey in you." The ship shuddered as the jump drive spun up, the familiar high-pitched whine building to a crescendo. The stars outside the viewport smeared into streaks of light. He felt the sickening lurch as the ship tore a hole in space-time, the familiar disorientation of the jump washing over him. He held his breath, waiting for the transition, the moment they would snap back into normal space. When the jump ended, the ship settled with a groan. Kalen checked his instruments. They were in the correct system. He looked out the viewport. The star was larger, brighter than he was used to, and orbiting it was a planet just as the map had indicated. It was unlike any planet he had ever seen. Instead of the usual greens, blues, or browns, its surface seemed to pulse with a soft, internal light, a gentle, ethereal glow that shifted in color, echoing the bioluminescence he'd seen on her skin. It was breathtakingly beautiful. He felt a thrill, a surge of adrenaline mixed with apprehension. He was here, he had made it. He started scanning the system, looking for any sign of anything, ships, installations, life signs. His standard scanners came up empty. No conventional energy signatures, no radio transmissions, nothing. It was like the system was empty, save for the luminous planet. But he had a different kind of scanner now. He concentrated, trying to recall the feeling of her touch, the resonance. He adjusted his ship's passive sensors, tuning them to detect something else. Not standard energy, but the kind of subtle frequencies she had described. He fiddled with the controls, the screen showing nothing but static. He was trying to find a storm in the quiet, a chaotic human trying to perceive alien harmony. Just as he was about to give up, a faint signal appeared on his adjusted scanner. Not on the screen, but as a subtle vibration in the ship's frame, a low hum he felt in his bones. It was the resonance. Stronger now, coming from the planet below. He had found it. He had found her. His hands tightened on the controls, a fierce determination settling over him. He began the descent, the glowing planet growing larger in the viewport, its shifting, luminous surface a silent invitation, a promise of answers, and the terrifying, exhilarating prospect of a reunion with the alien woman who had shown him the quiet in his storm. The journey had just begun. As the rust bucket broke atmosphere, the sky outside the viewport transformed. It wasn't blue or gray, but a translucent, swirling medium that pulsed with soft light, like a vast, living aurora. The luminous planet below was a sight that defied description. Continents and oceans weren't defined by solid matter and liquid water, but by variations in the intensity and color of the internal glow. Some areas were deep violet, others shimmering gold, some pulsed with vibrant green. It was a world made of light and energy. Kalen guided the ship through the shimmering atmosphere, his sensors still picking up only the subtle, resonant frequency emanating from below. No signs of technology, no structures. Where did she live? How did her people exist on a world of light? He felt a prickle of anxiety. He was a human, a creature of solid matter and chaotic frequencies, descending into a realm of pure energy and alien harmony. He spotted a large formation on the surface below, a vast, swirling vortex of intense blue-white light. It seemed to draw the surrounding luminescence towards it, like a drain in a cosmic ocean. The resonant frequency was strongest there. That had to be the location. He steered the rust bucket towards it, the ship groaning in protest against the unusual atmospheric conditions. The swirling light below grew larger, filling his viewport, overwhelming his senses. Suddenly the ship lurched violently, alarms blared, power flickered. He fought the controls, but it was like wrestling with a ghost. An unseen force was buffeting the ship, pulling it downwards. Not gravity, not turbulence. Something else, something resonant. "What the hell?" he muttered, struggling to regain control. The blue-white vortex below seemed to pulse in response, the light intensifying. He felt the familiar tingling sensation, but amplified now, a powerful current surging through the ship, through him. It wasn't gentle anymore. It was a forceful embrace, dragging him into the luminous heart of the planet. The ship system screamed in protest, warning lights flashing across the console. He was losing control. He braced himself, gripping the controls as the rust bucket plunged into the vortex of light. The viewports went white, blinding him. He felt a moment of intense disorientation, a sense of being pulled apart and reassembled. Then just as suddenly it stopped. The blinding light subsided, replaced by a softer internal glow. The ship shuddered and settled, landing on something that felt solid but wasn't visible. He looked out the viewport. They were in a vast, cavernous space. The walls weren't rock but solidified light, pulsing gently with a soft, internal luminescence. Strange, organic-looking formations of light filled the space, curving and swirling like frozen energy. He was here, on the planet of light. He killed the engines, the silence in the cockpit deafening after the ship's frantic alarms. He unstrapped himself, his body trembling slightly from the ordeal. He looked around the luminous cavern, feeling utterly insignificant in this alien realm. He had followed the call, the resonance, the promise. But what now? He stood up, moving towards the cargo bay, needing to get out of the cockpit, to feel the solid metal deck beneath his feet. As he entered the cargo bay, he stopped dead. She was there. She wasn't standing near the power junction this time. She was standing in the center of the bay, the soft light of the cavern reflecting in her liquid eyes. Her bioluminescent markings weren't just pulsing, they were flowing. A vibrant, ever-changing display of color across her form, blues, magentas, violets, greens, golds, swirling and intermingling. It was breathtaking. She was breathtaking. She looked at him, and her mouth, which he'd only ever seen form simple, questioning words, curved into a shape he recognized instinctively. A smile. A warm, welcoming, incredibly alien smile. "Kaelin," she said, her voice not a low hum now but clear and melodic, resonating in the luminous space. "You came." He felt a wave of relief so profound it almost buckled his knees. She was real. This wasn't a dream. He managed a shaky smile in return. "Yeah, I came. You sent a pretty clear invitation." He gestured vaguely at the cavern outside. "Though maybe next time skip the resonant tractor beam." The light on her skin pulsed with what he now recognized as amusement, the colors swirling into playful patterns. "The frequency of your vessel," she explained, "was discordant with the harmonic structure of the entry point. Attunement was necessary." Right, attunement. He was still trying to wrap his head around harmonic structure of the entry point. He took a step towards her. "So, this is your home." She nodded, her movements fluid and graceful in the soft light. "This is a resonant chamber, where attunement is deepened." "Resonant chamber," he repeated. Everything here had a name related to resonance and harmony. "And the planet, it's all light." "It is solidified energy," she confirmed. "Our form is born from it, we return to it." He looked around the luminous cavern, trying to process the implications. Beings of light, born from and returning to a planet of energy. It was so far beyond anything he'd ever imagined. You don't have skin to keep your fluids in," he murmured, remembering their earlier conversation. She made that soft churigaresque sound again, the light on her skin swirling into warm, inviting colors. "Our essence is contained within a field of harmonic resonance. We exchange energy with our environment, as I explained." Right, exchange. He took another step closer, drawn in by the ever-shifting beauty of her light, the warmth radiating from her presence. He was in her world now, a world of light and harmony, and he, the chaotic human storm, was standing right in the middle of it. He felt exposed, vulnerable, but also safe. accepted. The air between them hummed with a powerful, undeniable connection, a resonance that felt both ancient and brand new. He was here, on her planet, in her resonant chamber, and the journey felt like it had just truly begun. The question wasn't how he would survive here, but how his storm would learn to live in harmony with her light. He took another step towards her, and she didn't move. The swirling light on her skin intensified, the colors deepening, shifting into patterns that seemed to ripple with anticipation. The air around her hummed, and Kalen felt the familiar tingling sensation on his skin, the subtle vibration that was becoming increasingly familiar. He was in her world, a world of pure energy and light, and he, a being of solid matter and messy emotions, felt strangely drawn to its core. "This place," he began, his voice hushed with awe, "it's incredible." "It is," she agreed, her voice soft, resonating in the luminous space. "It is where we attune ourselves to the deeper frequencies." She gestured around the cavern, the light on her hand intensifying. "To the collective, to the source." He looked at the swirling formations of light, the pulsing walls. "The collective, the source. Our consciousness is shared," she explained. "In moments of deep attunement we merge, become one with the collective energy of our world, with our ancestors, with the light itself." Kalen struggled to comprehend. Shared consciousness, merging with a collective. It was a concept so far removed from human individuality, from his own fiercely guarded solitude, that it was almost incomprehensible. "So, you're not individuals." The colors on her skin shifted, a ripple of something he couldn't quite read, not distress, but nuance. "We are nodes," she clarified, "points of unique perspective within the larger whole. We experience individuality, but we also have the capacity for unity." Individuality and unity. It was a paradox that fascinated and unsettled him. He had spent his life resisting unity, guarding his individuality like a precious, fragile thing. And she, a being who could merge with a collective consciousness, was drawn to his chaotic, fragmented storm. He took another step closer, the distance between them closing. The air thrummed with growing intensity, the resonance building. The soft, warm light radiating from her seemed to wrap around him, drawing him in. He could feel the gentle pull of her energy, a magnetic force that had nothing to do with gravity and everything to do with connection. "Why did you find me?" he asked, the question he'd been carrying for weeks finally surfacing. "Why did you come to my ship?" Her gaze held his, her eyes deep and luminous. The light on her skin shifted to a pure, radiant magenta, the color of warmth and connection. "I was cast out," she said softly, the word resonating with unexpected pain. "From the collective, from the attunement." Kalen's breath caught in his throat. Cast out, from a shared consciousness. That sounded like a fate worse than death for a being of light and unity. "Why?" "Discordance," she said, the magenta light flickering slightly. "A frequency that did not align, an imbalance within the harmony." She looked down at her hands, the light swirling with what he now recognized as sadness. "I sought resonance elsewhere, when my own world rejected me." He took the final steps towards her, closing the distance. He didn't know what to say. Rejected by her own people, cast out from a collective consciousness that was her very essence. No wonder she had been adrift, wounded and alone. "I'm sorry," he said, the inadequate human words feeling small and clumsy in this place of light and energy. She looked up at him, and the sadness in her eyes was palpable even through the alien form. But there was also a flicker of something else, resilience, determination, and hope. "Your frequencies," she said, her voice soft. "Though chaotic, they resonated with my own discordance, with my isolation." She had sought out his storm because it mirrored her own internal imbalance, her own forced solitude. The realization struck him with profound clarity. They were two lost souls, two points of discordance, finding each other in the vast, indifferent expanse of space. His chaos, her imbalance. His isolation, her exile. A strange, broken symmetry. She lifted her hand, the magenta light radiating warmth. It was the same gesture she had made on his ship, the silent invitation to resonance. But this time they were in her world, a world of light and harmony, and the invitation felt different, deeper, more powerful. He reached out, meeting her hand. The resonance was immediate, overwhelming. Not the jarring shock of their first contact, but a powerful surge of energy that flowed between them, through him, through her. The blue magenta light exploded outwards, wrapping around them both, bathing the luminous cavern in its radiant glow. He felt the raw energy of the planet, the deep hum of the collective, and her unique frequency, the beautiful, poignant note of her discordance anchoring it all. His own chaotic storm roared within him, but it was met, not with resistance, but with a powerful, harmonic embrace. He felt his own scattered frequencies begin to align, to attune not to the collective of her world, but to her unique frequency, her beautiful imbalance. It was a connection that transcended words, species, even the fundamental nature of their beings. It was pure, raw resonance. He looked at her, illuminated by the combined light of their connection, and in her eyes he saw the reflection of his own vulnerability, his own yearning for belonging. In this alien world bathed in the light of a shared, broken resonance, Kalen felt something he hadn't felt in years, not just seen but truly met. His hand tightened on hers, anchoring himself to her in the swirling, luminous space. The journey to her world had been perilous, but the arrival, the resonance, was everything. The tension had reached a peak, not of conflict but of profound, intimate connection, leaving them suspended in a moment of pure, radiant vulnerability. The light surrounding them pulsed, the blue magenta deepening, swirling with vibrant gold and soft violet. It wasn't just a visual display. Kalen felt it as a physical sensation, a warm current flowing through his body, aligning something deep within him. The chaotic roar of his internal storm didn't disappear, but its sharp edges softened, its fragmented signals finding a strange, compelling rhythm against the steady, resonant pulse of her being. She didn't speak, but her eyes, luminous in the brilliant light, conveyed everything. A profound sense of connection, of shared vulnerability, of a bond forged in the crucible of exile and isolation. It was a silent conversation, a direct exchange of essence facilitated by the light, the resonance. He felt her presence within him, not as an intrusion, but as a natural extension of his own being. And he sensed, with a certainty that transcended his human understanding, that his own fragmented frequencies were resonating with a deep, fundamental truth within her. The intense light began to soften, the colors flowing back into the familiar patterns on her skin, though now they seemed richer, more vibrant than before. The air around them settled, the powerful hum of resonance fading into a gentle thrum that echoed the quiet pulse of the luminous cavern. They were still standing, hands joined, but the moment of overwhelming connection had passed, leaving behind a profound sense of intimacy and understanding. She slowly withdrew her hand, the contact breaking like a fragile thread of light. The lingering warmth on his skin felt like an imprint, a memory of the resonance. She met his gaze, and a new expression flickered across her alien face, one of hesitant curiosity, tinged with something that felt remarkably like affection. "Your storm," she murmured, her voice soft. "It is not uncontrollable." He managed a small, breathless laugh. "Feels that way sometimes." "You seek grounding," she observed, her gaze steady. "An anchor." "Yeah," he admitted, his voice rough. "Guess I do." He looked at her, at the soft, beautiful light pulsing on her skin, at the depth in her eyes. Maybe you're it." The light on her skin swirled into a vibrant, radiant magenta, the color of warmth and connection. It pulsed with an intensity that made his heart pound. "Resonance," she whispered, the single word holding a universe of meaning. He reached out again, not for her hand this time, but to gently touch her face. His fingers met the smooth, cool surface of her skin, feeling the subtle warmth radiating from beneath. The resonance returned, a soft hum that settled deep within him, anchoring his own chaotic energy. He felt a surge of protectiveness, fierce and unexpected. She was here in her world, vulnerable and beautiful, and he, the chaotic human storm, was her chosen resonance. He leaned closer, drawn in by the light, by the warmth, by the undeniable pull between them. Their faces were inches apart. He could see the intricate patterns of light flowing across her skin, feel the gentle vibration of her being. It was like standing on the edge of a beautiful, terrifying precipice. She didn't pull away. Her luminous eyes held his, and the magenta light pulsed with a silent, powerful invitation. He lowered his head slowly, giving her every opportunity to stop him. But she remained still, her form radiating warmth and acceptance. He closed the final distance, his lips meeting hers. It wasn't like kissing a human. There was no soft, yielding flesh, no warmth of blood and bone. It was like kissing pure energy, contained in a delicate, living shell. The sensation was overwhelming, a surge of resonance that flowed from his lips through her and back to him, amplified and transformed. The blue-magenta light around them flared, engulfing them in its radiant embrace. He felt the deep hum of the planet, the vastness of the collective consciousness, all centered on their shared point of resonance. It was a connection that went beyond the physical, a merging of essences, of frequencies, in a way he hadn't thought possible. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her closer, wanting to drown in the light and the resonance. Her alien form felt both fragile and incredibly strong against him, radiating a warmth that seeped into his very core. She responded in kind, her arms wrapping around his neck, her body pressing against his. The contact sent waves of pure, untamed energy through him, a chaotic human storm meeting a focused, radiant beam of light. It was intense, exhilarating, and utterly consuming. The kiss deepened, becoming more urgent, more demanding. The resonance built, a powerful current flowing between them, sparking something primal and elemental. In this place of light and harmony, their two discordant frequencies were finding a profound, undeniable attunement. It was messy, raw, and beautiful. He kissed her with all the pent-up loneliness, all the buried pain, all the chaotic energy of his human storm. And she met him with the quiet strength of her exile, the radiant intensity of her light, the boundless capacity for resonance that was her very being. The light around them pulsed in time with the frantic beat of his human heart, with the steady, resonant thrum of her alien essence. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated connection, two vastly different beings finding unity in a shared vulnerability, a shared yearning. He held her close, losing himself in the impossible reality of kissing a being made of light and energy, a being who saw past his surface and resonated with the storm within. The future was uncertain, the world outside this luminous chamber still unknown. But in this moment here, with her, bathed in the light of their impossible connection, Kalen knew he was exactly where he was meant to be. The tension had broken, replaced by a torrent of raw, undeniable intimacy, a bond forged in light and chaos. The kiss lingered, a silent conversation of shared energy and raw emotion. The blue-magenta light around them pulsed and flowed, a vibrant testament to their connection. Kalen felt the last vestiges of his carefully constructed walls crumbling, dissolving in the face of this overwhelming, alien intimacy. He was exposed, vulnerable, but in a way that felt not terrifying but liberating. Slowly, reluctantly, he broke the kiss, their lips parting with a soft, resonant hum. They remained wrapped in each other's arms, bathed in the soft, lingering glow of their combined light. He looked into her eyes, seeing the depth of emotion reflected there, the raw intensity of their shared moment. "Wow," he breathed, the word feeling utterly inadequate. A soft, churring sound escaped her, and the light on her skin swirled with gentle amusement. "Your frequencies are amplified," she murmured, her voice soft, still resonating with the echoes of their kiss. "Yeah, well," he managed, a shaky smile playing on his lips. "That's what happens when a storm meets, whatever you are." She tilted her head, the light on her skin shifting to a thoughtful violet. I am a node, attuned to the collective, and now, attuned to you." Attuned to him. The phrase settled deep within him, a warmth spreading through his chest. He held her closer, burying his face in the curve of her neck, inhaling the faint, electric scent that was uniquely hers. And I'm just Kalen, he murmured into her luminous skin. A guy with a rusty ship and a lot of baggage. She gently stroked his hair, the soft glow of her hand a soothing presence against his scalp. Baggage, she repeated, testing the word. Fragments of the storm. Something like that. He pulled back slightly enough to look at her again. The violet light on her skin held a quiet understanding, a deep acceptance that went beyond words. So, what happens now? He was in her world, a world he didn't understand, surrounded by light and energy he couldn't comprehend. He had followed her here, acted on instinct and a mysterious beacon. Now what? She met his gaze, her eyes holding a profound depth. The violet light shifted, swirling with gold, a color he associated with her most radiant moments. Now, she said softly, her voice resonating with a quiet certainty, we find our shared harmony. Shared harmony. It wasn't a concept humans often aspired to, not in Kalen's experience. Life was more about weathering the storm alone, finding moments of temporary calm between gusts of chaos. But here, with her, in this place of light and resonance, the idea of shared harmony felt not just possible, but essential. How? He asked, his voice quiet. She gestured around the luminous cavern, the light responding to her movement, flowing and pulsing in soft waves. This is a resonant chamber, she said. It is designed for attunement, for connection. She looked back at him, her eyes filled with that radiant gold light. We explore our frequencies, our resonances, together. Exploring frequencies, resonances, together. It sounded both incredibly intimate and utterly alien. He was a human man, she was a being of light and energy. Their fundamental natures were worlds apart. And yet, their kiss, their resonance had been the most powerful connection he had ever experienced. He took her hand again, intertwining his fingers with her luminous ones. The familiar hum of resonance returned, softer now, a gentle current flowing between them, a promise of deeper attunement. He looked around the glowing cavern, a place of impossible beauty and alien mystery. He had come seeking answers, a resolution to the enigma of the alien woman on his ship. He had found something far more profound. He had found resonance. He had found a shared harmony in his storm and her light. The future was still a vast, unknown expanse, but he wasn't facing it alone anymore. He was facing it with her, hand in hand, two different beings finding their way in a universe that had suddenly become much larger, much stranger, and infinitely more beautiful. The emotional arc had culminated not in a simple declaration of love, but in the deeper, more complex promise of finding a shared harmony, of navigating the path towards attunement together, leaving Kalen grounded by her presence and filled with a quiet sense of peace and purpose. This was the beginning of their shared journey, a voyage into the heart of resonance itself. The days, or cycles, on the luminous planet blurred into a rhythm dictated not by suns or artificial clocks, but by the ebb and flow of the light within the resonant chamber. Kalen spent his time learning about her people, the resonance, their history intertwined with the planet's core energy, learning about the collective consciousness, not as a loss of self, but as a shared ocean of knowledge and experience accessible through deep attunement. And learning about her, the node of beautiful discordance, the one who had sought out the chaotic frequencies of his human storm. They spent hours in the resonant chamber, hands joined, their combined light mingling and flowing. The initial overwhelming surge of resonance had settled into a steady, powerful current, a constant reminder of their connection. He learned to feel the subtle shifts in her light, the nuances in the patterns that spoke of her emotions, her thoughts, her memories. It wasn't a language of words, but a language of energy, of frequency. And slowly, tentatively, he began to understand. He learned about her name, not a word, but a resonant frequency, a unique chord in the symphony of the collective. He couldn't replicate the sound, not with his human vocal cords, but he could feel it, a specific vibration that was purely her. She, in turn, learned his name, the rough, guttural sound of it a strange note in her resonant world, but one she embraced, repeating it softly, letting the sound settle within her. He also learned about her exile, The discordance wasn't just an internal imbalance. It was tied to a forbidden resonance, a connection she had made years ago, a resonance that clashed fundamentally with the collective's harmony. She didn't elaborate on the nature of the forbidden resonance, and Kalen didn't push. He understood the weight of buried secrets, of past choices that led to exile. Their physical intimacy deepened, a natural extension of their emotional and energetic connection. Making love to her was an experience beyond anything Kalen could have imagined. It was a merging of light and form, of energy and matter. His human body, solid and tangible, met her luminous, resonant form, and in the fusion something new was born. The light around them intensified, swirling with incredible speed and intensity, their frequencies amplifying each other, creating a symphony of sensation and energy that bordered on the transcendental. It wasn't just a physical act. It was a profound attunement, a merging of their very essences on a level that felt both deeply spiritual and intensely physical. The chaotic storm of his human passion met the radiant flow of her alien energy, and in that union they found a breathtaking, overwhelming harmony. The light would subside slowly, leaving them intertwined, breathless, the silence filled with the echoes of shared resonance, the lingering warmth on their skin, a testament to the profound, impossible intimacy they had found. One cycle, as the light in the chamber pulsed with a soft, contemplative violet, Kalen felt a shift in her resonance. It was a subtle discordance, a flicker of unease. He met her gaze, his hand tightening on hers. "What is it?" he asked softly. She hesitated, the violet light on her skin rippling. "The collective, it is aware." Kalen felt a prickle of alarm. "Aware of what? Of him, of their connection, aware of us." She nodded slowly, her eyes troubled. "My prolonged attunement, with a foreign frequency. It is, causing ripples in the collective harmony." Ripples? His mind immediately went to the fragmented corporation data about highly sensitive energy signatures. Was her collective the source? And were they hostile? "Discordance," she clarified, her voice low. "Where there was harmony there is now, questioning unease." "And that's bad." "For the collective, yes, harmony is essential, discordance is a threat." The violet light darkened, streaks of anxious green appearing. "And for me, it means scrutiny from the deeper levels." Scrutiny from a shared consciousness that spanned a planet of light. The implication was terrifying. He was the source of her discordance, the human storm disrupting the ancient harmony of her people. He felt a surge of guilt, quickly followed by fierce protectiveness. He wouldn't let them take her, not after everything. "What will they do?" he asked, his voice tight. She looked at him, her eyes holding a mixture of fear and resolve. The green streaks in the violet light intensified. "They will seek reattunement with me, to understand the source of the discordance, to eliminate it." Eliminate it. The word hung in the air between them, heavy and menacing. He knew with chilling certainty that eliminating discordance in a being of light and energy probably didn't mean counseling. It meant erasure, assimilation, or worse. The deep, intimate conflict had arrived not as an external attack but as a threat from within her own world, targeting their very connection. The tension in the luminous chamber crackled, no longer with the warmth of resonance, but with the cold edge of fear and the fierce determination to protect what they had found. The violet light with its anxious green streaks continued to pulse on her skin, reflecting the growing unease between them. Kalen held her hand tighter, the familiar resonance now tinged with a new current of fear. "Eliminate it," he repeated, his voice low and hard. "Does that mean eliminate me?" She met his gaze, and the green intensified, vibrating with distress. "You are the source, the external frequency. The collective will perceive you as an infection." An infection. His human essence, his chaotic storm, was seen as a disease to be purged from the perfect harmony of her world. He had never felt so utterly alien, so fundamentally wrong, as he did in that moment, standing in her luminous home, holding her hand. "We have to go," he said, the urgency immediate and absolute. "Back to the ship. We need to get out of here." She hesitated, her eyes filled with a deep, painful conflict. "My world, my people. They see me as an infection," he countered, his voice firm. "And you for resonating with me as discordance. Whatever their collective harmony is, it doesn't have a place for us. Not together." He looked at her, his gaze pleading. "Back on the rust bucket, it's just us. No collective, no judgment. We can be whatever we find out there." The green light began to recede, replaced by a resurgence of the deep magenta, the color of connection and fierce loyalty. She looked at him, at the familiar rough edges of his human form, the storm she had resonated with, and a decision seemed to solidify within her. "My attunement with the collective," she said, her voice stronger now, laced with sorrow. "It is breaking because of you." "Because of us," Kalen corrected, pulling her closer. "It's not just me, it's what we found together." She leaned her forehead against his chest, and he felt the warmth of her light through his worn coveralls. The magenta pulsed against him, steady and resolute. "Then my place," she whispered, her voice muffled against his skin, "is no longer with the collective. It is with the storm." He wrapped his arms around her, holding her tight. His storm, her light. His chaos, her resonance. Two discords finding harmony in each other, even if it meant permanent exile from her world. It was a painful choice, a rejection of her very nature, but it was a choice made for him, for them. He felt a wave of emotion wash over him, gratitude, fierce love, and a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was protecting. Protecting their impossible connection, protecting her from the harmony that sought to erase her beautiful discordance. "Okay," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Okay, let's go, let's get out of here." He gently pulled her away from him, taking her hand. The luminous cavern seemed to hum with a new intensity, the collective awareness pressing in on them, a silent, judging presence. They had to move fast. They ran back towards where the rust bucket had landed, the light-infused ground feeling strangely solid beneath their feet. As they neared the ship, the swirling blue-white vortex at the cavern entrance began to intensify, the light pulsing with an angry, agitated rhythm. The air grew heavy, crackling with energy. He could feel the collective's focus shifting, their attention drawn to the source of the discordance, his ship, his presence, their impending departure. They weren't just going to let them leave. He reached the rust bucket, its familiar, solid metal form a comforting contrast to the alien luminescence surrounding them. He scrambled inside, pulling her in after him. The cargo bay was still bathed in the soft, lingering glow of her light, a ghost of their earlier intimacy. He raced to the cockpit, strapping himself into the pilot's seat. She stood behind him, her hand resting on his shoulder, her light a steady warmth against his back. "They are intensifying the harmonic field," she warned, her voice strained. "To dissipate the foreign object, to erase the discordance." Kalen swallowed hard. Dissipate. Erase. He slammed his hand down on the ignition sequence. The rust bucket shuddered to life, its engines groaning in protest against the alien energy field pressing down on it. He needed to break free, to punch through the harmonic field before it tore the ship and them apart. He gripped the controls, his knuckles white. The vortex outside was a maelstrom of light now, surging and pulsing with destructive intent. He could feel the ship straining, the metal groaning under the immense pressure. This was it, the ultimate test. His chaotic human storm against the collective harmony of a world of light, and the fate of their impossible connection, of their shared harmony, hung in the balance. The external conflict had arrived, a physical manifestation of the fundamental clash between their natures, forcing them to fight for their right to exist together. The escape was now a desperate race against time, against a force that sought to unmake them. The rust bucket screamed around them, the ancient metal protesting against the overwhelming harmonic pressure. Warning lights flared on the console, circuits overloading, systems failing. Kalen fought the controls, pushing the engines to their absolute limit. The vibration from the planet's intensifying energy field rattled his teeth, blurring his vision. He felt like he was trying to fly through solid rock, through a force that was actively trying to dismantle the ship molecule by molecule. Beside him, her hand was still on his shoulder, a steady, grounding presence. The light on her skin was no longer beautiful or warm. It pulsed with a rapid, frantic rhythm, radiating a powerful energy he felt deep in his bones. She was fighting too. Fighting the collective, fighting for their connection, pouring her own resonant energy into countering the field. "The pressure is immense," she cried out, her voice strained, the melodic tones replaced by a guttural rasp. "It seeks to fragment your form, to dissipate the ship." Fragment his form, dissipate the ship, the clinical terms for annihilation. He gritted his teeth, pushing the thrusters. "Hold on," he roared, sweat streaming down his face. He could feel her energy flowing through him, a powerful current that somehow bolstered the ship's failing systems, creating a bubble of resistance against the crushing harmonic field. Their combined energy, his chaotic storm and her focused resonance, was the only thing keeping them from being torn apart. The ship inched forward, groaning like a dying beast. The vortex outside was a blinding white, a furious maelstrom of light. He was flying blind, relying on feel, on instinct, on the desperate hope that they could break through. "Almost there," she gasped, her light pulsing with a final, desperate intensity. He felt a tearing sensation, a violent lurch that threw him against his restraints. The ship screamed, metal twisting, plating groaning. For a horrifying moment, he thought they were breaking apart. Then just as suddenly, the pressure eased. The blinding white light outside the viewport snapped back to the streaking colors of hyperspace. The ship groaned and settled, the alarms slowly beginning to quiet. They had made the jump. They were gone. Kalen slumped back in his seat, his body trembling, exhaustion washing over him. He took a ragged breath, the air in the cockpit smelling of ozone and burnt metal. He looked at his console. Systems were offline, damaged, but the core functions were intact. The rust bucket had held together. He turned to her. She was leaning against the back of his seat, her form flickering slightly, the light on her skin muted and dim. The vibrant colors were gone, replaced by a faint, pulsing white like a dying star. Her breathing was shallow, ragged. "Hey," he said, his voice hoarse. "You okay?" She looked up at him, her eyes dull, the usual liquid depth replaced by a tired emptiness. "The attunement," she whispered, her voice weak. "With the collective, it is broken, permanently." He reached out, taking her hand. It was cool to the touch, the vibrant warmth gone. The resonance was faint, a weak pulse against his skin. She had severed her connection to her world, to her people, to her very source, to save him, to save them. "I'm sorry," he said, his heart aching. "I'm so sorry." She managed a weak smile, a faint flicker of light appearing on her lips. "No, harmony was not ours. Our harmony is here." She squeezed his hand, her grip surprisingly strong despite her apparent weakness. "Together." Tears stung Kalen's eyes. She had given up everything for him, for them. He pulled her gently forward, wrapping his arms around her. Her form felt fragile now, the luminous energy that had defined her diminished. But the connection, the resonance, was still there, a quiet hum that spoke of a bond deeper than light or matter. He held her close, burying his face in her neck. "We'll figure it out," he murmured, his voice muffled against her cooling skin. "Whatever happens, we'll figure it out, together." She leaned into his embrace, her form flickering again. The faint white light on her skin pulsed slowly, a tired but still present beat. The escape had been harrowing, the cost immense. She had lost her world, her collective, the source of her being. He had been the chaotic storm that had pulled her from harmony. But in the quiet of his damaged ship, drifting through the cold vacuum of space, they had found a new kind of harmony. A shared, broken, but fiercely defended attunement between a human man and an alien woman. Two exiles bound together by resonance, and a love forged in the heart of a storm and the light of a dying world. The resolution wasn't a return to normalcy, but the quiet acceptance of a new beginning, scarred but together, ready to face the vast unknown side by side. The journey was over, but their story, their unique, impossible love story, had just truly begun. She remained weak for several cycles, the faint white light on her skin a constant source of worry for Kalen. He rigged up a modified energy conduit from the ship's damaged systems, creating a low-level field around her, hoping to provide some form of environmental support she might need, given her nature. It was a shot in the dark, a desperate attempt to replicate the luminous environment of her world. She accepted it without complaint, seeming to draw some small comfort from the gentle hum of the field. During her recovery, she spoke little, conserving her energy. Kalen spent most of his time in the cockpit, plotting a course, repairing what he could of the damaged rust bucket. He had no destination in mind, just away. Away from her world, away from anything that might have been connected to the fragmented corporate data he'd found. He was a nomad again, but this time he wasn't alone. The thought of her, weak but present in the cargo bay, fueled his determination. He managed to patch the comm system and sent out a coded burst on an old, unused frequency. Not a distress signal. He didn't want to attract unwanted attention, but a subtle query, a feeler for anyone else operating on the fringes, anyone who might trade for supplies or repairs without asking too many questions. Days later, he received a response. A single burst, also coded, giving him coordinates to a remote, unofficial station deep in an asteroid belt. It was risky, but they needed supplies. And perhaps, just perhaps, he could find someone who knew something about beings made of light, about resonant frequencies. As they approached the asteroid belt, she began to regain some of her strength. The faint white light on her skin started to pulse with a little more intensity, and streaks of soft violet and gold began to reappear. Her eyes regained some of their depth, focusing on Kalen with renewed awareness. "We are approaching a gathering point," she said one cycle, her voice still quiet but clearer. Kalen glanced back at her from the pilot's seat. "Yeah, a station, place to get supplies." "It feels chaotic," she observed, the light on her skin swirling with subtle unease. "Many conflicting frequencies, disharmony." Kalen snorted softly. "Welcome to the fringes where harmony is just a word in a dusty history book." He paused, then added, "You think you'll be okay there? It'll be busy, lots of people, different species." She was silent for a moment, considering. The violet and gold light pulsed thoughtfully. "My attunement, it is now primarily with you," she said finally, her gaze meeting his. "The external frequencies, they are less overwhelming, less compelling." His heart gave a quiet thud. Primarily attuned with him. The significance of that wasn't lost on him. She had chosen their resonance over the collective harmony of her entire species. "But the disharmony," she added, a faint tremor in her voice, "it is loud like your storm, but external." "Yeah," he said, turning back to the controls. "It is." He knew this wasn't her world of light and peace. It was a harsh, brutal galaxy filled with creatures who would exploit anything different, anything they didn't understand. She was vulnerable here, her unique nature a potential target. His protectiveness, which had surged in her resonant chamber, solidified into a quiet, constant resolve. His storm, his chaos, his willingness to fight would be her shield. He brought the rust bucket in for a careful landing on one of the station's external docks. The station was a sprawling, ramshackle collection of salvaged modules and prefabricated sections, jury-rigged together in the void. It was exactly the kind of place Kalen frequented, grimy, dangerous, and anonymous. As the airlock cycled, she stood beside him, her form still radiating that faint, fragile light. He looked at her, at the alien beauty of her features, the subtle shift of colors on her skin, and felt a surge of pride and fear. She was with him, in his world now. The airlock doors hissed open, revealing the bustling, noisy, chaotic interior of the station. The air was thick with the smells of recycled oxygen, stale food, and unwashed bodies. A cacophony of voices in dozens of languages, both human and alien, filled the space. Beings of all shapes and sizes jostled past, their frequencies, their internal storms, clashing and mingling in a symphony of disharmony. Kalen felt her flinch slightly beside him, her light flickering with unease. He reached out, taking her hand, grounding her with his presence, with their shared resonance. He looked out at the crowd, then back at her, at the beautiful, fragile alien who had chosen his storm over her own world. A quiet certainty settled over him. He didn't know what the future held. He didn't know how they would navigate this chaotic galaxy together, a human and a resonant, two discords seeking harmony on the fringes of existence. But he knew they would face it together, hand in hand, his storm and her light intertwined against the darkness. Their journey had just entered a new, unpredictable phase, where their intimate bond would be tested by the harsh realities of the external world, forcing them to rely on each other, to protect their fragile, impossible connection against the pervasive disharmony of the galaxy.